Welcome to the Biz Coach Show. In every episode, we share information and advice for small business owners, small business leaders, startups, and entrepreneurs preparing to launch their business. Our mission is to give entrepreneurs the edge they need to succeed. If you're in need of business coaching, head over to mybizcoaches.co and book your free coaching consultation today. The Biz Coach Show is presented by Eric Whitmoyer, the owner of My Biz Coaches, a business coach, serial entrepreneur, author, and speaker, as well as David Macon, a certified professional in talent development, growth expert, writer, and small business strategist. Our guest today is Darren Finnegan, founder and principal consultant of Harness Data Consulting and co-founder of Scale Smart Project. Harness Data Consulting aims to enhance productivity by addressing inefficiencies in manual data entry and across multiple platforms, identifying time-consuming tasks, and enabling clients to achieve more without the need for additional hiring. Darren is an expert in data strategy, process improvement, reporting, and analytics. Learn more at harnessdataconsulting.com. Well, Darren, it is great to have you with us today. How are you doing?
I'm doing just fantastic. Thank you, David. Thank you, Eric. I'm super excited to be here.
We are very excited to have you here. And Eric, always great to be with you. How are you doing today?
Absolutely. Doing excellent, David. Thank you.
Awesome. Love it. Well, hey, Darren, before we dive into some of the topics we have lined up for today, can you tell us a little bit about your journey?
I would love to. So a little fun fact about me. I was actually born in England. I know you can't really tell, no accent or anything like that. Moved here in 93, so I've been here pretty much my whole life. My dad was an automotive designer, so a lot of work opportunities in the Detroit area, so that's how we ended up here. And, you know, when I was a junior in high school, I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I think a lot of people have that problem, you know, and the best I think I could come up with at the time was I'll be a pilot. That way I can, you know, fly back and forth across the Atlantic. And, you know, that was, and at the time, basically my whole life path was go to college, get a degree, have a career, and then retire. You know, and I think that's what so many people think is their option. And a whole nother story, but eventually fell into a math degree instead of, you know, going to the pilot school. I was very lucky to have graduated high school in 2009. So while everyone else was in the middle of this economic downturn, it sort of actually forced me to reevaluate. And I ended up starting with one semester at a community college, turned into 2 years, an associate's degree in engineering. And then, as I said, you know, working on a mathematics degree. And I did that, finished my bachelor's and decided I wasn't quite done yet. I'm going to do a master's degree, right? But around that time, started thinking about, well, what am I going to do? What does one do with a math degree in this day and age, right? And so started going online and just trying to look at, you know, what options were available. And everyone was talking about data being this next big thing in business, right? I think someone at Google said a statistician is going to be the sexy job in the next 10 years, right? So thought, okay, well, that aligns pretty well with, you know, what I already know, or, you know, it syncs up well with the math degree, working on this master's program. So I decided to go out, teach myself Excel, because, you know, that's not something that's typically covered in a math degree, and started looking for career opportunities. At the time, I was working as a math tutor, which I absolutely loved, but definitely wasn't going to be something I wanted to do long term. And just from having sort of that experience, I was able to get a job at a company that had been operating for a few years, but had only just opened their U.S. location. And coming in as just the data analyst, basically asking me to just create simple Excel reports on, you know, very simple questions. How many leads do we have? What's the cost? What's the ROI? Things like that. And it's funny because looking back now, you know, that having that job experience really shaped what Harness would become, because it was an ideal client. You know, obviously I didn't know enough at the time, but started looking under the hood of how do we figure out some of this information, and really seeing how inefficient things were when it came to collecting data, storing data. Obviously I was there to do the analytics and the reporting, but I couldn't really do those pieces until I had a chance to start addressing some of the problems that I found from an operations or process standpoint. And it was during that time, somebody had said to me, one of my coworkers, I remember, I don't even know what we were talking about at the time, but she said to me, I remember it very clearly. She said, "I'm surprised you're not an entrepreneur." And I thought, well, is that something that you can just do. Like, again, my mindset had always been on, you have a career, you do that, and then maybe somewhere down the road you can start a business or something like that. But it had never really occurred to me. Unfortunately, the job I was working at the time got shut down. We were all laid off. It was a very unfortunate situation. I was able to pivot and get a job in downtown Detroit at a really great company with really great people, writing database code, right, creating reports. And so now I got to see what the other side of it looked like, where you had clean data to work with and all the different systems communicated effectively, and there were great processes in place. And then you can really build, the forecasting and, do some of those deeper analytics. And at the time, I was sort of thinking in the back of my mind, well, I could always go into data science, right? That's a great career option. I was learning database and code. I was learning how to write Python code, those types of skills. And it's like, well, if I just buckle down a little bit more, finish my master's degree, and then I can really focus on, building up my skill set in data science, the machine learning, the AI, those types of things. And I found that I just couldn't motivate myself to continue working on that. I was much more interested in, well, if I was going to start a business, what would it be and how would I do that? And started doing a lot of research, really got into audiobooks quite heavily just because, there's so many great books out there. And I think it was Start With Why by Simon Sinek. And one of the things he talks about is, just make a list of, from all of your work experience, the things that you love doing and the things that you didn't love doing. And I got to the realization that the analytics part wasn't what I really loved. I really loved doing was that process improvement. When someone would come to me and say, look, this is how I'm currently doing this job. It takes me 4 hours and I have to do it once a month. We set up that spreadsheet or whatever it is so that you just click a button and all that work is done. So now you've freed up 4 hours or whatever it is of that person's time. That to me is what I found most gratifying. And I always found I was sort of in a position of being in the middle between, sales managers, sales directors, the non-technical people, and working with the IT teams just to bridge that gap. And I thought there's got to be companies out there that have this similar problem where they understand the need for having analytics and reporting and having good business data, but don't know how to take their current processes and collect it effectively and be able to build that strong foundation. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, exactly. Yes.
Yeah. So I've been doing this for about 3 years now as Harness Data Consulting. It's been an absolute blast. Definitely, you learn so much more just by kind of going for it. It was during the pandemic. My partner Kayla and I, we sort of just realized that now is the time to do what we want. And we were living in Denver at the time. And I just sort of said, it was actually a week before my 30th birthday. I said, I'm going for it. I quit the job that I had, set up the LLC, just put myself in the world, started networking. And like I said, it's been an absolute adventure. It's been an incredible learning opportunity. And I'm excited to say, we're pushing full steam ahead. We're getting ready for what the next phase of this business looks like. So we're actually in the process of rebranding we're going to be calling ourselves the Scale Smart Project, which is going to focus on data issues, but also look at people, processes, along with data and technology. So really running the gambit of all the different areas where we know that there are inefficiencies in business. And other than that, currently my partner Kayla and I, we live completely nomadically. So we live out of a Mercedes Sprinter van. We travel all around the country and, just trying to get the most out of life and connect with some amazing people.
I love it. I think a lot of people hear that and be very jealous. I think there's folks that would think of that as kind of living the dream, right? Running a business, nomadic lifestyle. So very cool. A little envious of that freedom at times. That's
Thank
amazing.
you. Yeah.
Well, and I would have to say that probably some of those younger listeners out there that are probably intrigued by that.
All I'm going to say right now is that it's doable. If you have, there's a way to make it work.
Well, there's something that David can attest to. Is I had a short stint for about 2 months as Hummerman. Hummerman, yeah. I was going through a challenging time in my life, and I was living in my my H2 Hummer.
Wow.
So it was kind kind of a stretch. I was living in an $80,000 vehicle when an average home was $100,000. But hey, it was
a little less spacious than the Sprinter van,
Yeah, just a tad bit less spacious. Yes.
Yes, I imagine you didn't have like cooking or anything in there. Did you have a fridge or anything?
I had I blew a bunch of fuses.
Hey, we've been there.
Interesting. It sounds as though obviously, your stint in the employment realm, right, that you were bitten by the entrepreneurial bug,
absolutely,
and kind of sucked you in. So that's encouraging. Encouraging, in the sense that you found something you were passionate about and wanted to go after. I love the story because I think it's heroic and I just went for it and I'm going to go make it happen. So kudos to you, because I think that's a great story, and I think more people need to hear those types of stories.
Thank you, Eric. That means a lot. I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Eric, I'm curious, how did you and Darren first get connected?
Yeah, so Darren and I, there's a networking group that he partook in. I don't know if you're a member or not, but it was called H7, and and he was in on a session that we did quite a few. I was back in October or November, I think.
It's been a few months now. Yeah, definitely. Definitely a great group to visit. I'm still definitely seeing the effects of all the great connections that I've made, and definitely to maybe sign up at some point in the future when it makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I know it's a newer group in that we meet remotely. And so with at the time, Darren, I think you were probably in Detroit, actually, were you? Or no, you were somewhere else.
We were in Utah heading to, we were going to Arizona. We weren't exactly sure where at the time. And that's why I joined the Phoenix chapter, because just to see who the area I could meet.
Yes, absolutely. So, but that's how we connected, David.
Oh, that's awesome. I love it. Well, before we dive into business data, which is our topic for today, can you share just a little bit more about Harness Data Consulting and maybe some of the work that you do, Darren?
Absolutely. And, the goal of Harness Data Consulting was always to be people first, right? Looking at, again, I think a lot of companies these days recognize the need for business analytics, right? And having good reporting. But what a lot of companies don't look at is the people cost involved. Who is collecting this data? How are they collecting it? Where are they collecting it? What systems do you have in place? How much time and effort does it take to have good data collection and have solid data? And I found that the more steps, the more people, the more time it takes to collect that data, the quality is just going to drop, right? And if you're starting with bad data, you're not going to get good analytics to begin with. So, it took me a while to really figure out precisely what that would look like. I thought maybe for a while it was helping implement CRM or, something like that. I found typically when a client comes to me and says they don't have a CRM, really what they're saying is they don't have a sales process, which, is a much deeper question to try and solve. You can't just implement something and hope that it's going to fix a problem. So just trying to identify where in the organization are those time-consuming manual data entry tasks so that we can free up your people's time and they can focus on a job that's more meaningful to them, and B, give that energy back into the company and back into that growth that we want our clients to have. Yeah,
I love it. That makes a lot of sense. And I'm thinking about maybe two different audiences that might be watching this. One is somebody whose business is really struggling, and clearly they understand why I need to work with somebody like Darren that can help me look at my work processes. But what about maybe a company that's doing well, things are kind of working, maybe a little bit of complacency, kind of speaking to both of them, why is it important for that business owner to analyze tasks and work processes?
Absolutely. And I think I would love to talk about the first one, businesses that are struggling. Again, finding where can we get more done with less people, or without having to bring on, not less people, but without having to bring on new employees, right? Where are those bottlenecks that are causing us to be ineffective? Or, if it's a matter of why aren't we selling as much as we expected to be? Well, if you have that data there, then you can really start to identify where some of those challenges might exist. For the second type, and I think the client that we're usually more excited to work with is the company that has, good revenue coming in, right? They've figured out what it is they do. To get to that point, maybe they had to bootstrap, wearing multiple hats, that sort of thing, where suddenly you have just work that's gotten done the way that it's always gotten done. And now they're at that stage where it's like, we're going to pour rocket fuel into this. We're going to really start upping, what we've got coming in. We're going to build out all this sales, all these types of things. Taking a moment, you've got that growth plan, but taking a moment to make sure that your processes are set in a way that you're not going to burn your people out. You're not going to have that plateau of, well, we can't physically make the machine do anymore because there's too much friction. There's too many, it's taking too much time to fill out all of these different processes. It's taking too much manpower. It's just draining our people. So being able to feel confident that you have those clean processes ready, and then when you've flipped that switch and really started to hit that growth phase, now you've got that great data that you can do that analytics and you can be proactive and really understand what's happening.
Yeah, and I think there's something to say there in regards to the term I think you want to use there, Darren, is operational drag.
Yes, I love that. Operational drag, for sure.
Yeah, being a salesperson by nature, operational drag kind of resonates with me.
Absolutely. And I think that's something when I tell people I'm a data consultant, they go, oh, it's analytics, it's all of these things. Well, a lot of the time that the data that we're talking about is operational in nature, right? So I think operational drag is a fantastic way to say it because it's getting things done efficiently.
Right. When Darren and I first started talking, he started saying certain words. Obviously, David, you can appreciate they were resonating with me in a great way. As you know, I'm all about digitizing and automating anywhere possible, right?
Yep.
And especially in the space of the small business owner, whether it be entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, or small operators, less than 10 employees. They have to get by on as little as they can possibly,
that's right.
use, right? From a staffing perspective, you reference staffing, and the incremental cost of adding an additional headcount, especially with the minimum hourly wage that you're paying today at, $18-20 an hour, depending on where the role is. With that plus benefits and everything else factored in, you're talking about a $50,000 or $60,000 cost. Definitely. If I can get a solution, some kind of automated solution that would absolve some of that, to your point, functional work that some task that somebody has to do by 4 hours, a day, you're saving a ton of payroll hours that I don't need to pay for that I can deploy elsewhere and get better results from.
I think that's so true. And I think there's another component as well as these companies are growing, it's also the technology piece of you got to work with the tools that you have available to you, right? A growing company, the type that you're talking about, can't afford to go out and build a database right off the bat, right? They have to, and they may not know how to do that, right? So they're leveraging Google Sheets and Excel and free versions of things like HubSpot to just get started, because that's not their focus. They want to do the thing that they started their business for, right? So I think you've got multiple areas where you start to see from that growth perspective, there are those challenges that can be sort of cleaned up.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other part I was going to say, when I think through some of the things you were talking about, one of my big rubs when I sit with owners is you mentioned making decisions with data, right? Yeah. One of the things that David and I can both appreciate is the amount of the depth of data that we had in our previous company that we worked at. And we had, if I said 200 metrics, that's probably overstating it, but it had to be pretty freaking close to that.
I'd say you're about right. That was the number that came to mind, honestly.
Now, to be fair, our scorecard was, it was reduced down to, I think we had maybe 11 key metrics that we really focused on. But we had access to 200 different numbers, right? You're talking about a company, we did 105 million the last couple of years we were in operation before we sold. And we had 1,500 employees, 1,600 employees, I think, at our peak, 140 locations. So compiling all that data, pulling it all in from a point of sale system, a a traffic counting system, an hours management system, an HR hours management system, kind of incorporating all of that so we could get all the different metrics we want to measure, like how much revenue per hour worked are we generating per store, right? And you start talking about the level of metrics and people like, I can make phenomenal decisions with that kind of data, but the problem is capturing all of that data and then bringing it all together and making it make sense.
Right. And ensuring that it's accurate and reliable and you really know what it means for sure.
Yes. Yep.
And I think it's so important that businesses know their numbers. And I think metrics are so important that, you can be so granular and break down however you think your business should be. But at the end of the day, garbage in equals garbage out. And you want to be able to make those decisions confidently.
Yeah. Agreed.
Absolutely. Well, maybe to take it one step further, Darren, how do you then help a business owner identify some of those opportunities in their business? What does that look like?
Absolutely. So, thinking in terms of, what we're currently looking at is people, processes, data, and technology. And for my part, I'll give you an example if I can. I was working with a company that was it was a franchise, and they were rebuilding their onboarding process. So I was working with the person who was responsible for doing onboarding and starting with trying to figure out, okay, well, what does your to-do list look like? What are the things that are adding up and causing you sort of this headache, right? So sort of like an initial discovery piece. And what we figured out is I said to her, okay, just give me one small task that I can help with. And she said, well, I have to send these emails out to a third party for every new franchise that I'm working with. And I have to include 4 points of data. I have to include their name, email address, phone number, and their business address. It's like, okay, well, we've got those first three, but where do we get the business address from? And she says, well, I go into HubSpot, I find the right record, I scroll down, I look through 30 documents, find the correct one, download it, it's a PDF, I take it, I copy it, I paste it, so that's one very small process with a lot of steps. But now, this is the part that I really enjoy is, let's start questioning this. Let's start investigating. So why is it that the business address is in this PDF document that's stored in all of the, through all these steps? Well, it's because the marketing team collects all that information and fills out the PDF 8 weeks after the franchise has been sold. Okay, 8 weeks in. Well, when does the franchise owner actually set up their business, like their office address? Like, when do they get that? Well, that's week 4. So why is there a gap between the time that we collect it at week 4 or create it at week 4 and collect it at week 8? And so you start taking apart all of these steps and looking at who is doing what. And that's the part that I really enjoy, is tracing these data points back through all the different processes and understanding, well, what if the franchise owner just entered it into the system at week 4 when they've set up their business, and then they can upload documented proof that the address is right, do a quick check. Now everyone has that data point. We don't have to wait till week 8. So a lot of the work that I do is really focused on, that sort of detective work of identifying, a few small processes. Immediately as you start looking behind the scenes, you begin to really unravel, all of those pieces. So an important part for what we do is, we go in, do sort of an initial discovery piece, sit down with the owner leadership team, and just ask the questions that we know from our experience are indicative of bigger problems. And then once we've honed in on, okay, well, there seems to be a lot of Excel going on in this department, right? Or there's, for some reason, PDFs floating around. Then we can really start to trace those pieces. We like to go through a very deep, investigative phase where we really understand the entire ecosystem of how people, data, technology, and processes are all working together, or in most cases against each other. And then, after that, that's when we really look at, well, how do we solve these problems? Where can we, maybe start with a few different areas? Obviously, change is hard for a lot of companies. And that's, an important piece that we've learned over the years is you have to be very strategic about how you implement these changes for a myriad of reasons, not least which is people don't like changing, right? So one of the things, as Kayla has joined me, that's what she's good at, is systematizing things. And she's created this amazing process flow that we're going to go through with our clients of, these steps one at a time. And then we get to that implementation phase. Now we're actually going to bring solutions. Does that answer your question, David?
Yeah, no, I think it's wonderful, and I think that's such a great example of an inefficiency, right? That sometimes
Right.
people are like, well, this is just how it is, right? I just pulled off the PDF and I do, and it's just like, well, why are we doing that? So I
Mm.
love that, and I'm curious, are there other common inefficiencies that you see as you are working with different clients?
It almost always seems to be in the handoff between either departments or people, right? Because if the sales team is using one platform, and again, the same company, I'll give you another example. The sales team was filling out a Word document to create the contract. So all the important details, all the terms, everything that need to be met by all of the other teams, the only place it existed was in a Word document, which was then turned into a PDF, signed, and then sent to 7 people. And each of those 7 people had a separate spreadsheet or system or process that they had to then retype it out. And it's just like, well, if the salesperson could take that extra second of, instead of filling out the Word document, enter it into the system some way, somehow. And maybe we need to think about what's the best way to do that. But once it's in the system, I guarantee you we can write a piece of code that then generates that Word document for you. So then you can take it the rest of the way through that. But then you don't have to have all of these extra steps of trying to go in and pull that data out, right? So I think that's quite often the case, is just, team A does it one way, and then team B, they've had to figure out their own steps. And I think there's really 2 challenges, right? That when you're the person doing these tasks, it's very hard to say, well, this is what I'm spending all my time on. Because if you're constantly jumping from thing to thing to thing, it's hard to make that mental list, right? And I feel like in a lot of organizations, there isn't usually one person whose job it is to look across departments or look across, and that's where you start to see, maybe within the ecosystem of that own department, it works kind of well. But when you look at, well, they do all this work and then the next team undoes it and then does their own version of the work, like, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it's funny as you say that, because I literally was just working through, we created some finished product documents to be available to clients, and we put them, as you would, in a PDF so it doesn't get messed up, right?
Right.
So you put it into a PDF and then you go back and you're like, oh, I need to make changes to it. And for some reason, the PDF, when you go to edit it, regardless of having the best software to do it, it just never seems to come out the same way.
Absolutely.
And I can't imagine. I have a law firm that they create documents all the time, and that's actually one of the biggest challenges. Is you've got a PDF, and now I'm like, well, I need to edit it. I'm like, oh no. So they actually end up recreating the document.
Oh no.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but again, like PDF, that's a perfect example of sort of a business tool that everyone has and leverages, but it can easily become a data silo if you don't use it correctly, or a pain of making edits or changes if it's very structured in a particular way.
Yeah. I mean, the more that I recognize with the PDF, the use of a tool like that it's an end user, right? It's like I'm delivering this to you as a finished product, not as somewhere where I store data.
Yes,
that's exactly terrible. Right. Unless you have an editable PDF in place where people can.
Sure. But even then, maybe still not the best. So,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. One thing I'd love to say, David, when you were asking me about, identifying opportunities and how I actually go about helping, I do have sort of a methodology that I like to employ, and I think you guys will like this. So it's not the best acronym, but CSAR, SAR, kind of like a Russian czar, but not the same. So it's not the best, but when I'm looking at data processes, right? Collection, storage, analytics, reporting. In that order, right? First, you have to look at what data is being collected. Why is it being collected? What data isn't being collected? Who is doing that collection, right? You have to understand that piece. And then you have to understand, how are we storing this data? Do we have a database? Most of the clients I work with, no, right? So is it in this system? Is it in your CRM? Is it in your project management system? Is it Excel? Is it, looking at, what that, collection of tools looks like. Once you've cleaned up those 2 pieces, then the analytics and reporting makes sense to, and at that point, you almost get those for free. because now you have that data, you can bring someone in. Like I was brought in that first company to do some of those analytics, right? But now you have that data available. And then with reporting, I think it's important to think about reporting means not just your executive summaries for your leadership teams, but how do the people within your organization access and use the data that they need to complete their job, right? How do you share data with third parties and partners and other clients like that? Do you have a client portal? Can people log in and see information about their own account, right? There's all those questions. And again, it all requires that solid foundation of making sure that you're collecting things effectively and storing in a way that it can be useful over the life cycle of your business.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And that sequence in particular makes sense. So I appreciate you sharing that with our audience.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, you also shared a bit about kind of that franchise company. Do you have another example of maybe a business that you've helped that's kind of one of your favorite stories or go-to stories about how you've helped them overcome some of these challenges and inefficiencies?
Absolutely. I have one that I really like because, being an Excel guy, I do have a tendency of if I can do it in Excel and write some crazy formulas, that's always good. I was working with a social media marketing company out of Denver, and I love this company because their whole mindset is about keeping social media social and not having it, not just that addicting algorithmic thing that you do, but like really creating conversation. So it's like, it feels good to help a company that wants to do things a little bit differently. And this client was sending out, monthly summary reports to her clients. And, here's the analytics, here's how your post performed, those types of questions. And it was taking her 30 minutes to an hour to create each report because she was doing these reports in Google Slides. She was pulling the information out of the social media tool that she was using and then creating, and like the reports looked good and it had a nice flow and a nice summary to it, but taking so much time going back and forth and mistakes were happening, right? So it was just such a time consuming process. And she had about 12 clients at that point. So that's 12 hours in a month that somebody has to go and do that work. And what I set up for her using, I didn't actually realize this until I was working on it, but you can connect Google Slides and Google Sheets together. And what we built is a tool where you could download that raw data out of the social media system, upload it into the Google Sheets, and then have all your formulas automatically run, calculate all of those percentages, and then you hit the refresh button, and it takes images of those graphs or whatever it might be, and puts it into the Google Slide. So now you don't have to manually change every single number. So it took, what was taking 12 hours to create 12 reports. Now it takes maybe 1 hour to create all 12 reports, right? And that's, again, like if you think about it, it's not as if we're bringing on some fancy new software. It's not as if we're increasing the cost of technology of how to solve this problem. It's just using the tools that you already have in a slightly more innovative way. And even I didn't know that you could do that until I tried it and I had that thought. And, again, that's part of what I love doing is just trying to make things work, make it work with the tools that you already have and really just improve those types of processes. So that was one that I was always very excited about. And I like to use it as an example.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. I'm sure there's a lot of people that could relate to that and think about how much more time she has to work with clients, right? I mean, yeah, amazing example. So thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Well, I'm curious on, your perspective on this. One of the things Eric and I talk about a lot, whether it's on the show or just conversations that we have, is the future, right? Whether that's artificial intelligence or other things like that. So I'm curious, how do you see data strategy impacting business owners in the future?
I think that's a fantastic question. I think you've sort of already hit on it with the AI piece. And, I think the ideas that we've talked about so far, that was almost, 10 years ago, that should be your data strategy. But now that we're in not only the cloud computing phase of things, but now we're in this AI age where, so many businesses are able to get an advantage from using some of these tools. Again, if you don't have that strong foundation in place, you're going to be behind the ball a little bit on implementing this new technology, right? And as it opens up more creative ways of solving your business problems, if you don't have that foundation in place, you're going to be missing out on those opportunities. So I definitely think data strategy will continue to be something that all businesses need to consider. I think a lot more companies are starting to create roles such as, data strategist as an actual title, as opposed to your traditional, you have data analysts, you have data engineers, you have IT people. But I think you definitely would want to have someone in that role to, again, understand the entire picture, that entire ecosystem. So then you can then take tools like AI and apply it at all the different phases of your business. So I'm super excited to see what AI is going to do to help people just, again, this is my mission, to eliminate some of these boring manual tasks so that people can have a job that they actually love. And I think in the next few years, we're going to be able to start bringing more creativity and more passion back into the workplace, because we can eliminate a lot more of these time-consuming type tasks. I think you know what I mean.
Yeah, interesting, because I know that when AI really kind of kicked off the beginning of this past year, right, in 2023, right after the launch of ChatGPT, it was a lot of discussion about what's the impact, how's it going to influence the business play, business, and anybody who knows that AI has been around 10, 15 years at this point, right, even longer than that, quite honestly, but even more prevalent. But now it's like right in your face. Now there's no avoiding it, right? And I think what was interesting is we started, extrapolating from what we were seeing. How could we employ this in the average everyday business owner, right? How can I put this in, even as a solopreneur, for instance? What could I be doing to incorporate this? And ironically, I believe it's interestingly enough, it's creating even more of a level playing field for the small business owner.
I'm so glad you said
that. Because I can operate. I don't have to have a supercomputer generating all this, calculating and crunching data and everything. It's actually using some of the different AI applications that are out there, having the different software talk to each other and pull data from one place and recreate it. And there's a lot of different ways to play that, and it just gets very interesting in my eyes where we can go and what we can do with that.
I think you're absolutely right, Eric. And I think that has been the trend, even with cloud computing and, the technology in general. It's becoming more and more accessible for the little guy, for the solopreneur, all the way up. So now we'll be able to see a lot more competition at that lower level against, some of these bigger players. And I think that's huge.
Yeah. And one, ironically, there, as I think through that, the whole Great Resignation, yes, which has been a topic that we've discussed on our show multiple times, sure, as well as AI. I think there's a correlation between the two.
Sure.
Because it creates more opportunity for people like yourself who did a corporate job that, I enjoyed it, was fun, I learned something, but now I can take this information, this specialist information, I can deploy it elsewhere to people who see the value in it, and I can come and help them and earn a good living doing that. That's right. And I think I think there's a very unique time that we're in where it's really going to tie a lot of these pieces together at the same time. And I'm intrigued by that as a business coach, because I see so much opportunity in all of this coming together at the same time.
I think you're absolutely right. And it's exciting to see what will happen, because I think so many people do have jobs that they just don't enjoy. And if we can maybe just pivot, I think we will always want to do business with other people, right? There will always be that aspect of wanting to work with somebody, even if it's on a Zoom call like this. But I think there will always be that need to have real people. And I think the AI will just allow us to have more of that, exactly like you're saying, Eric, with individuals being able to take control and do what they want to do.
Right. And I'm a huge proponent of the let's get the boring, mundane tasks. Have the computers do that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it's 2024. I think we have the tools to do it at this point. It's just a matter of do you want to or not.
Yeah. Well, and I think the role that you play is really intriguing, because helping people understand how to use, you'd mentioned, how to use the existing tools you have now.
Yeah,
to make this more efficient, create a better system or process that allows me not to have costs that I don't need, to have a better set of data to make good decisions from. There's so many different things that I think tie into that, and I think that's very compelling. And for, again, as somebody who's going into business, this is the one thing I say on this show on a regular basis, and David can, that support me. We love working with people who are good at what they do, but maybe struggle with other components of the business that they're not so good at. Right. So, and you used a very similar analogy earlier. You're like, they're really good at this, but pulling data together, capturing, and then making good, intelligent decisions. They're still, they don't understand that part of it. No. So let me show them how to gather the data and bring it together, and then let's talk about what kind of decisions you make from that data.
That's so right. People go into business because there's something they want to create in the world, right? And that's not data processes. That's not spreadsheets. I mean, in my case, maybe, but for other people, right, it's to do something in the world. And I just want to support the people that are out there doing good things. Let's make a positive change, and I think we can do that through business.
Yeah, I agree.
Absolutely. Well, Darren, earlier you mentioned or alluded to kind of data management strategy. And I think that that's an important thing that, potentially a lot of business owners don't think about. And I'm wondering, as you're working with clients, what are some of the biggest gaps that you see in a, kind of comprehensive czar data management strategy, if you will?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I'm thinking of an example for a client that I worked on, and they just wanted to have a report that showed how many, it was another franchise. So how many franchise locations had they sold? We work a lot with franchises because that's sort of where Kayla's experience is. And, so simple report, how many locations did we open? And because of the way that they sold these different contracts, there was some confusing business rules in place where sometimes multiple contracts could be associated with one another. And you could ask people within the organization, do you understand the difference between if the contract is written like this or written like this? And quite often the answer would be, no, I have no idea, but I just do these steps and I try not to think about it too much, right? So there's a piece there of, just understanding your own business logic, your own business rules. And maybe there's a training component of helping your people understand this is why we do things. And to get back to that report I mentioned, it took, I think, like a week of combining 3 different data sources, trying to cross-reference, contract IDs to come up with this list of here's all the locations that you sold last year. And then we sent it to the directors, and they said, okay, well, this one, that's not right because that's actually this one. And so again, there's challenges there. So because they didn't have a database that listed all the locations sold, and because they didn't have those, the team itself didn't have clear understandings of what is this business case, right? And because the technology just wasn't there, you can't even get that simple of a report. So, we talked about having thousands of metrics, but if you can't even get the first metric, which is what is my sales, then what is the point there? So just trying to, and I think a big part of it is wanting to make that change, right? That leadership recognizes that, things don't have to continue the way that they have been, and be willing to foster a culture around making those types of changes. And that's really when you start to fill in some of those gaps of, there's so many blind spots. And I think a lot of times it's hard for leadership to take feedback from their team because, all they hear is, well, I don't want to do this task anymore. But really what they're saying is there's a better way to do this if we just sort of put
exactly.
Yeah.
It's a great point. That's exactly. And that's often when I experience it, that's often what it is. And it requires somebody like me coming in from the outside who is the objective observer that says, yeah, your team actually has some really good ideas. You need to listen to them, right? I mean, that's literally what it comes down to in many cases.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's because they're familiar.
Right.
But the owner's got blinders on, or the executive team has blinders on, and they're like, you just don't want to do the work. No, there's just a better way to do it. And and it might require some adjustments. It might require a small investment, but almost always, if deployed correctly, it's a cost savings once it's employed and utilized.
And if I can give just one more example, one of the businesses I worked at, there was a woman, and I'm very happy to call her a close friend now because we work so closely together. But she was the administrative assistant, and her job was to make sure that a lot of these manual tasks that could be automated, make sure that they all get done, right? So she was the one updating this system and this spreadsheet and this and that. So she had almost a full-time job of just doing that type of work, but she was also leading projects. She was also, engaging with other members of the team to get things done. And it's a waste of potential because she could be doing that part of it full time, and they could continue to invest in her and get her to a point where that is what she does. And let's eliminate the rest of that stuff. So I think that's a big gap that people don't realize, is that potential to do more with the team that you already have, because you don't really know what your people are capable of until you challenge them in a way that's meaningful. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Great point.
Absolutely. Well, but before we wrap up, Darren, there's something that you've touched on a couple of times, and I want to kind of get your perspective on it. And it's this concept that a business might have a lot of data or may have a lot of metrics or a lot of, information flowing through it. But I've heard you a couple of times mention it's really only good data if it's clean and accurate, right? And so I'm kind of curious, from your perspective, or as you're working with clients, how do you see that play out when you have unclean data, or things aren't as accurate as they could be, and how is that detrimental to the business?
Yeah, well, that ties back to processes, right? And understanding, again, where does that data come from? So if a lot of what I enjoyed early on in my career was almost running experiments and saying, is the thing that this person entered here, what did that actually mean to them? And you can start sitting with the team and understand, why did you fill out this entry, your sales record? Why did you do it this way? Well, and part of it's because I was told to, whatever. But you start to understand, what did that data actually mean to the person filling it out? And so often it does not align with the person who is then taking it and making decisions off of that, right? They don't understand that when you said this person was not qualified, maybe they meant something slightly different than what you think it is, and then that skews your sales metrics, right? So there is definitely a piece there around just understanding the who and the why of the data collection piece, so that you know what it is. And then once it's set in stone and you've got that training in place so people can follow that process moving forward, and maybe there's a component of changing up the interface that your salesperson, whoever else it might be, right? So there are a lot of aspects there that could be considered that, you have to address to get it to that point where now we all agree this data means this, and we can finally start asking questions on it, start interrogating it, and get those results so we can be that much more proactive.
I love that. So important, right? And I think that's something that business owners need to think about, is it's not just having the data, it's, do people understand it? Is it the right data? Is it accurate? So thanks for adding a little more insight there.
Yeah.
And I'm curious. So if somebody's, listening to this or watching this and they're thinking, okay, this makes sense. I have some opportunities. I'd love to work with a data consultant like Darren. What does that process look like when somebody starts working with a data consultant?
Well, first of all, expect a lot of questions. That's what I do, is I like to ask questions, But so the way we have things structured is, I think I mentioned this earlier, we do a free assessment, right? We want to sit down. We want to understand from you what your pain points are. And again, I think it's important to realize that what the leadership team thinks is the problem is almost never what the actual problem is. So that's why our next step is to then go one step deeper, do that investigation, and really look at, well, what is actually happening. And then again, leveraging our knowledge and expertise to say, you thought it was this, but actually maybe it's more like, maybe it's not quite strategy, maybe it's more of a leadership problem, or, something in that realm. So, and I think it's so important that we work, again, I think I've already mentioned this, but working with clients who are willing to make that change and to, understand that it's going to be tough, but we can make a measurable impact on your business by solving some of these challenges.
Yeah, I love that. And you mentioned kind of a key aspect, something you're looking for is a client that's willing to change. Are there any other characteristics that would be maybe an ideal client for you?
Yeah, and I touched on this earlier, but we definitely love working with anyone who is making some kind of impact, whether it's social, economical, environmental, just allowing your employees to go live remotely and go do those types of things. Like, we love to just work with companies that are innovative and doing things better or differently. Again, we love working with franchise businesses, and again, looking for those companies ideally that are at that stage of, hey, we're going to grow, and we just want to make sure that we grow correctly and have that growth mindset, have that willingness to say it's going to be hard, but we can be different. We can do better. We can make changes.
All right. So Darren, I got two things for you. The first one is remote work.
Yeah.
You just hit on a topic that I have dealt with extensively over the last 2 years.
Yeah. What have you seen?
Well, most specifically, the biggest challenge is leadership.
Yeah.
Does not have a way to measure metrics effectively when people are working remotely.
Sure.
Or at least there's a gap, right? They weren't structured that way. People are harboring for, I want to be able to work from home, but I can't monitor work solutions. So first and foremost, give me 2 or 3 things that a business owner could incorporate that would help them feel better about people working from home and still getting productivity or being able to manage or view or, you know what I mean? Gauge productivity. That's the word I'm looking for. And then the second thing would be, if you're developing an app that does that, that would be great. I could probably sell that to a lot of customers for what it's worth.
Sure.
And then your perspective on that, because I think that's interesting as well.
Yeah, I would say that if your viewpoint is that, productivity is a measure of how long time is spent sitting at a computer, then you've got completely the wrong idea, right? And actually,
thank you.
Sort of unrelated, but closely related is I was working in a call center for a while and creating scorecards, that kind of thing. And they wanted to measure down to the second every single thing that these agents did to make sure they're on the phone, right? And if you're trying to do something similar to your remote employees, you've got it totally wrong, right? It should be about, is work getting done? Are we being productive? How are you tracking and managing projects? How are you setting priorities? And are your people hitting those projects, right? So you can look at, how long does it take to complete a project as opposed to how long did you spend sitting at your computer working on this project, right? Those are two very different things. So I would really encourage people to, look into project management tools, that part of it to really, again, and this is exactly what I mean when I talk about clients doing things differently, is let's shift the focus. Let's no longer make it be about how long were you beaten against the keys for, as opposed to, did you create something that you like doing? Was it fun? Did it get done in a timely manner, right? So I think if that answers your question, Eric, unfortunately, I don't have an app for you yet, but maybe it's something to start thinking about. And, because I don't think remote work is going away. I think that was the one positive out of the pandemic was we learned that, we can work from home some of the time. I think it's different for everyone, but there's no reason to force your employees to be in office just to make sure that they're getting work done. There needs to be respect. There needs to be trust. And you want to verify that trust, right? You want to make sure you're not being taken advantage of, but there are ways to do that and still, give your people flexibility to, that work-life balance thing. The opportunity is there to make it so much better.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I appreciate that. That's interesting feedback because that's exactly where, as somebody who's managed thousands of people, that's exactly where my head goes. You're monitoring the wrong things.
Right.
If you're trying to monitor daily activity, you're managing that. And David does a lot with training and development and leadership coaching, and he has the same perspective. You're managing the wrong things. You manage the output, not the workflow. Right. It's at the end of the day, if the output is appropriate and measures up and exceeds expectations, then I don't care where you work from.
Right.
Yeah.
Or how long it took, as long as it got done and it looks good. I think you're absolutely right, Eric.
Yeah. I appreciate that. Yeah. And to your point, I agree 100%. It not only is it not going away, but I think it's going to continue to exacerbate. As a matter of fact, I am of a belief, and it kind of goes with the whole resignation piece of the Great Resignation, but more and more people are going to opt to do, I'll take a remote job and be a 1099 employee, and I'll be happy to do that because I'll just do it on my own. I'm okay with that. More and more people are getting very comfortable with that. 20 years ago, that was a hard pill to swallow, but a lot of people are very interested in talking about that now. That makes it a different place for employers, and they're going to have to figure out how to, set that up correctly. The only caveat that I add to that is not everybody should work from home.
Maybe not. No.
There are some people that just don't have the right environment.
I think you're right. And I think it's all about finding that balance. But if I can share a quick personal story, I don't know, this just sort of popped into my head. But, this time last year, we were actually down in St. Petersburg, Florida. We had just started our travel, lifestyle. And there was one Monday afternoon where we sort of just said, you know what? We don't want to work today. We're going to go to the beach. We're going to just go hang out. We saw dolphins. It was beautiful. We had a great day. And we almost sort of just took a day off. The next day, we were so much more productive. We were ready to go. We were able to get things done. And because we took that time for ourselves to recharge just a little bit, the next day, we put in probably 18 hours of work. So again, I just want to encourage people to just think differently about the way that you have your employees work in this day and age. Because again, there's so much more that we could do to improve things for everybody.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks for sharing that. It's a great example. Well, Darren, as you wrap up here, I'm curious, is there anything else that you want to share about Harness Data Consulting or maybe some of the other projects that you have coming up?
Yeah, definitely. So Harness Data Consulting isn't going away, but we are actually in the process of rebranding. We're going to be turning into the Scale Smart Project. And when I say we, it's my partner, Kayla, and I. She's come in. She took, all the work that I'd done and really systematized it and turned it into a true business. So we're super excited about that. And as part of our travel lifestyle, we are also always very interested in connecting with other nomadic entrepreneurs or business professionals. So we are launching our own networking group. Right now, we're thinking we're going to meet maybe once a month, and it's going to be virtual. So we're called the Nomadic Networkers. Cool. Our inaugural event is coming up next week. So anyone listening who wants to, connect with other like-minded folks in that regard, happy to do that. And then one other thing I'd love to just mention for myself as sort of a side hustle, as a sort of a passion project, I do also teach math on the internet through Zoom. I've been doing that virtually for a few years now, and I've actually written a curriculum specifically geared for algebra students who are calculator dependent, who need to go back and relearn some of those number facts that they struggled with in elementary school. So any parents out there, anyone with high school age kids who think their kids need some help in math, that's just something I do just because I love to do it. So feel free to reach out.
I love it. Well, I know we've got your main site, harnessdataconsulting.com, but if you have links to some of the other projects as they become available, we'd love to share that with the audience as well. So
I would appreciate
definitely put that in the description and show notes.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Awesome. Well, hey, Eric, I don't want to leave you out. Anything new at MyBiz Coaches that you want to spotlight?
I'll continue to bang the drum. As you know, 100 coaches is our goal this year. So, a very lofty and ambitious goal. We're excited about the opportunity, and more specifically about where this takes the business over the next 12 months. But that's our primary focus is finding more people that are interested in becoming a MyBiz coach, learning how we help businesses grow and scale, and more specifically, connecting with people like Darren, right, with this specific skill set. Certainly the average business coach, they have a number of different disciplines and areas of the business that they're good at. But data assessment and data analysis and everything that Darren does are all extensions of things that we can do as a coach to help a business improve and prepare to grow. So, we're constantly looking for people like Darren that have those types of skill sets that we can incorporate within how we support and grow companies.
Awesome. Well, that's great, Eric. And if people are interested in learning more, it looks like head over to mybizcoaches.co/coach, and they can learn more about that. I don't think you charge anything to have a conversation with somebody who's interested, right? They can just pick your brain.
Happy to talk to anybody.
Awesome. Cool. Well, Darren, thanks again. It was great having you on with us, and thanks for all your insights with our audience. We really appreciate it.
David, Eric, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you guys so much.
Yeah, thank you, Darren. Appreciate it. It's great seeing you again.
Yep. We'll see you on the next episode of Biz Coach Show.